I'd love to like just get some kind of biographical information, like what got you into theater making originally, what drew you to the different companies that you worked with, and how do you kind of think that um, those places you started influence your trajectory?
Very interesting. Thank you for that. You know, with me, I worked very, very hard as a young actor. My mother, you know, single mom growing up in the Bronx. She had three, four jobs. She was a nurse. She was a private nurse. She was a registered nurse. Got into the clergy late in life. But as a single mom raising a young black boy in the Bronx, I was born in the West Indies. I was born in Trinidad, West Indies. I lived in England for a few years with my mother. We both came to the States together. Um, and it was just she and I. And I could have gone in many, 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 many directions as a young black boy growing up in the Bronx. But she held a very stern hand. She had a very stern hand on me. Not too stern, but stern enough. Being a West Indian mom, that there's a sternness there that is unmistakable as you're growing when you're growing up. So I went to a public school in the Bronx, PS 80, right off of Marshallou Parkway in the Bronx, and I had a teacher, Barbara Glickenstein, who was my earliest support. An amazing woman, a teacher, a mom, a mentor, a guide, a support, someone who lifted us up in her sixth grade class to do great things. She introduced me to theater. She introduced me to what theater can do and how theater can move people. And that was the beginning of my journey. She took us to see Broadway shows. She took us to see off-Broadway shows, coming out of her own pocket. Um, and I will never forget the excitement I felt watching the curtains go up or the lights go up on a show, and how transformed I was as a young boy growing up in New York. Um, I don't think I would have gotten those experience if it weren't for her. And in eighth grade, I started a theater group at PS 80, got a teacher to come in, and we did musicals. And then the hunger for theater and the hunger for that applause and working hard and the, the work ethic of an actor, that was instilled in me at a very early age. And I was also very athletic. So the idea of either going to DeWitt Clinton High School, which is right across the park from where I lived, or Performing Arts High School, which I knew nothing about until the teacher that we got, Gregory Camera, Kammerer, Gregory Camera, until he came in and said, listen, you need to audition for high school performing arts. And I had not heard of it prior to him saying that. So I worked up a few pieces, one from Don Quixote, the Man of La Mancha, which was my very first leading role in junior high school, and one from there, and another piece. What was the other piece from? I think a Shakespeare piece. And I auditioned for Performing Arts High School, never thinking that I would get in, but he wanted me to audition for it. I did my best, and lo and behold, I got in. And that was the beginning of my professional training, well, my pre-professional training in theater. After that, I went on to the Juilliard School, then to Webber Douglas Academy in London, came back, did some teaching and studying at NYU in New York, and that was the I got on the tracks at that time, and I loved it. I loved theater. I loved audiences. I loved actors. I loved directors. I loved teachers. I loved traveling. I loved learning language, not French and German and Spanish, but language as in the how language can transform, how language can teach, how language can break through boundaries, um, and how characters in plays are created and formed. I was so fascinated by that. I was so fascinated by seeing an actor on stage so transformed, and then waiting patiently at a stage door and seeing that actor walk out completely different. And the amazement I had when I would see these actors or get an autograph or just see them come out of the stage door, with their scarves and their hats and their no makeup, and they're like, oh, you were just that person I saw, and I was amazed by that. So that lit a fire under me a lot more. Then of course, it built from there. As a matter of fact, this theater I'm working at right now, Syracuse Stage in Syracuse, New York, was the theater that gave me my very first professional theater gig, directed by Arthur Storch, Storch, who was the artistic director at the time. And now I'm back here all these years later, having done 23 Shakespeare plays, countless classical plays, directed a bunch of shows, resident director at American Stage in St. Petersburg, Florida, West Coast Black Theater Troupe, the artistic director of the African American Shakespeare Company now. But having to come back here where I got my professional gig is quite wonderful, and I feel at home here. Um, and my desire to give back now that I've gleaned all this information, I've learned so much, I've been given so much. I feel now that it's time for me to give back and teach what I've learned, direct actors the way I like to be directed, direct young actors so that they feel they have agency, so that they feel they are loved and appreciated in theater, so that they know that this theater world is an amazing, fanciful, tough, creative, deep, passionate, tearful at times, funny most of the times world that they are part of, and uh, so that when they're done with a rehearsal of mine, they've learned something. They've had a journey. They've done so much, and this is why I just love being a theater maker, um, because when I see actors take their curtain calls and audiences are on their feet giving ovation to what they just saw on stage. Actors who have never gotten a standing ovation before, to know what it's like to have anywhere from 100 to 300 to 500 people jump to their feet. There's nothing like that for me as a director. Um, as an actor, I've experienced that. But when I'm giving that opportunity to young actors right out of a conservatory or their first professional gig or something, and they stand there, it brings tears to my eyes. So this is why I love theater making. I love actors. I love what we do, and giving this gift of theater to audiences. There's nothing like it in the world.
Wow. Yeah. And I think that like a lot of what you said kind of does align with the teacher's draw as well,
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
to give students the experience of excellence and like accolade
And the best teacher, as when you're a teacher and you love what you do, Nicholas, and once you become that teacher, um, your students shouldn't feel like you're teaching them.
right. Yep.
They should feel, I think that's Socrates mentioned this, right? That you, among other kind of cool things, um, that your students will learn without them feeling that you are teaching them, because of the questions you ask, because of the things you do, because of the way you deport yourself, because of the things you talk about and the way you talk about things. And then they walk out of a session or a rehearsal or a studio session or a coaching session or a lecture, and they're full, they're excited, they can't wait to get to do some research, and they wonder, why am I so excited? Well, because Professor Nicholas just talked to us, and he talked to us in a way that, or she talked to us in a way that, wow, I'm excited about learning. How did he do that? That's the mark of a good teacher or a mark of a good director, right? When the actors come back the following day and say, I was so excited after rehearsal, I was up until 2 a.m. taking notes, and can I ask you a few questions? Absolutely. Absolutely.
Definitely.
Let's check in. Let's talk about what you've been thinking about. That's what I love about directing as well,
Mm.
and teaching.
What do you think the biggest challenge of being a director today is?
Well, today, as in right now, is COVID, of course, right? That is huge. Directed a number of plays in the past year and a half, most of them on Zoom. I just directed a production of Pipeline by Dominique Morisseau at West Coast Black Theater Troupe. Uh, Social distancing, it's very, very difficult. But as with anything else, we have to conform, we have to adapt. We are human beings. We've been adapting for millions of years. So there's just another way of adapting. So that's specifically COVID directing, right? But as a director, I don't, I, I would like to think, well, as a Black director, no, 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 no. As a director, um, we have to understand that what we do is special. We have a special gift and a special task to help actors chip away at what they might bring into a rehearsal. I I feel personally, and this is a personal feeling of mine, that actors are creative entities. That you come to rehearsal already knowing, thinking about what to do in rehearsal, how to do it, how to. If you get cast as Biff in Death of a Salesman, which is a role I'm sure you will play one day as an actor, or Caleb in The Whipping Man by Matthew Lopez. You would read the play, you would understand it, you would do your research. Richmond, Virginia, 1865, Abraham Lincoln, slavery, East versus North versus South. You would do your research, and you would come in with a physicality, a language already being formed in your body and in your mind. It's the director's job to ask that actor, to ask you to come in like a big old boulder, a big rock, a big piece of granite, because the art is there. It's in you, right? The Venus de Milo was already in the sculptor. The role is there. It's up to the director now just to chip away all the excess stuff, so that that character that you have within you is just exposed. And by the end of the rehearsal process, that those final chips are taken away and a final gloss is put on it, and there you are, and there you have it. You may not even know sometimes that that character is within you, but you come in with so much, and it's up to me as the director to just yeah, let me just chip away. It's there, it's there. Come on, Nicholas, it's all there, man. It's all there. Let's see how we can play and release it. So that is the role of the director. And you know, there are times when you have to learn the language to talk to actors. You have to learn their language. You have to learn a specific behavior. You have to know your actors when they're coming into the room, what's going on with them. Sometimes an actor can't give 100% in rehearsal every day. Sometimes they have their cat died, their girlfriend broke up with them, their boyfriend broke up with them, there was a death in the family, the car had a flat tire on the way to rehearsal, they got a $200 ticket for something, that da 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 da. So you've got to know, hey, what's going on with Nicholas today? Let me, you know, let me make him laugh. Let me just see what's going on with him. And that is another part of the director's job. I don't find anything that is so difficult about what we do as directors in general. In general, I mean, there's specific. There are some times when I don't want to do that play because it's too close to my own heart. Or I don't want to do that play because I don't understand it, or it's yeah, it's too racist for me. I can't breathe in that world right now, so I'm going to say no to that. Let somebody else do that. But I love the craft of directing because I've been among some amazing directors in my career. So long answer to your very short question. I don't know if there's any major roadblocks or things that get in the way of my directing. It's just the individual piece and how to create that piece. And the theater that I may be, like, I'm supposed to do a production of Romeo and Juliet coming up in late summer, right? But it's Romeo and Juliet with a happy ending, right? Spoiler alert, they don't die, right? So I've got to create that. Yes, it's massive. How do I do that in COVID times, with 6 actors, and they both live at the end? Boom, right? How do I do that? So that's something that I'm working through constantly, getting the team together and getting that. But I've already said yes to it, so I have to do it. So I've got to work my way through that. So that could cause a little bit of anxiety, but I think without that, I should leave the business.
Mm,
Just as an actor, just before we go on stage, if I don't have a little butterfly in my stomach, I might as well quit.
right. Is part of it.
Yep, yep.
Is that the Romeo and Juliet with the African American Shakespeare Company?
No, this is with American Stage in
Okay.
St. Petersburg, Florida.
Okay.
Yeah. Um, and it's gonna be a challenge. I mean, I've seen Romeo and Juliet with 7 actors at California Shakespeare Theater in Orinda. I've been a member of the California Shakespeare Theater for 23 years. I've seen a bunch of Romeo and Juliets. I've acted in Romeo and Juliet twice before. I've directed an age-appropriate version of Romeo and Juliet at my theater, African American Shakespeare Company, with 14-year-olds. Um, as a matter of fact, an audience member told me after a performance that now she completely understands Romeo and Juliet, having seen it with age-appropriate actors.
Mm,
The play just comes to life. So yeah, yeah. So we'll see how that goes. So that could cause challenge, but like anything else, you just go around it, you hurdle it, you figure it out, you deal with it. That's what we do as creative people.
yeah, that's great. Um, so I do want to talk about Shakespeare in
Yes,
particular.
yes.
And I was just wondering, like, if you could track for me some of like um, your favorite moments on stage playing Shakespeare, any like favorite roles or any roles that have been like particularly challenging, either as an actor or a director.
Wow. Do we have all day? I will give you some highlights. Look, I was in high school when one of my teachers cornered me in a hallway and said it was a Tuesday because acting classes were Monday and Thursdays, and she said you should memorize uh, Shakespeare's Hamlet's speech to the players. Speak the speech I pray you as I pronounce it to you, trippingly on the tongue, and have it ready by Thursday's class at 1:30. And I went home and I started reading it. And I've got to tell you, Nicholas, that the reading, that was the first time I had read it. I'd never seen a production of Hamlet. I'd never read the play. And up until 3 in the morning that morning, I read Hamlet. Didn't understand a whole lot of it, didn't understand, but that didn't matter. I absorbed it. And for some reason, Shakespeare moved me. Shakespeare, something about my DNA, something about my headspace, whatever it was. And this was my sophomore, my junior year at Performing Arts High School. And I read Shakespeare voraciously after that. And I memorized that speech and I can still recite it. Then I memorized the prologues to Henry V. I started reading I read all, by the end of high school, I read all the plays. Um, and then, I got into Juilliard, and my very first production of Juilliard was King Lear. I played Kent, right? That was perhaps one of the most uplifting and terrifying experiences I've ever had on stage. Because again, it was my first show at Juilliard. We were thrown into the deep end with King Lear. Um, I played Kent, and I still have terrifying and amazing memories from that particular production because my God, it was my very, very first performance of a full length Shakespeare play, right? So that was my introduction, thrown into the deep end. After that, my friend, I was voracious after that. right? My favorite roles that I've ever performed, Richard II, I'm sorry, Richard III, um, most recently, as a matter of fact, Leontes in Winter's Tale, Capulet in, of course, Romeo and Juliet, Petruchio, a comedy, Taming of the Shrew. My gosh, it goes on Caliban. Now, again, speaking of favorites, I was an actor, a resident actor at Milwaukee Repertory Theater in the early 80s. Um, John Dillon was the artistic director at the time. Julie Taymor, does that name ring a bell to you?
Yes.
Julie Taymor came in to do mask work with us at Milwaukee Repertory Theater. And I had done some mask work at Juilliard. Pierre Lefebvre was my teacher at the time. And I was, I loved it. I loved it. I was pretty good at it, I would like to say, but I thought I was. But when Julie Taymor came to do mask work at Milwaukee Repertory Theater in the early 80s, she and I glommed onto each other immediately. I had the utmost respect for her, and I still do. Um, and she asked me after the class was over if I would come to New York to play Caliban for her in her production, of course, of The Tempest. It was her very first Shakespearean directorial attempt. And John Dillon released me from my contract temporarily for me to come to New York to play Caliban for Julie Taymor. One of the greatest experience I've had in American theater was working with the incomparable Julie Taymor. And I was lucky enough to be put in her book. If ever you find her book, at least I guess it's probably one of her books now, so I'm sure she's done many more. But um, on page, I think it's 116 or 118. Anyway, she has a photo of me as Caliban. So that was one of the highlights of my theatrical career, playing Caliban for Julie Taymor. I've had several. There are stories that actors can tell about terrific performances, or scary performances. There was a performance of the Scottish play at Milwaukee Repertory Theater. I played Malcolm, and the curse of the Scottish play. You've heard of that, and people tend to think, oh, it's just a story. I don't believe that. I'm a strong believer that that the play is cursed. I've done it 4 times in my career, and each time something weird. I've directed it. When I've directed it, nothing, well, a couple of incidents, minor incidents, but something always happens. So believe in that curse. When somebody says, don't quote the lines, or when you quote the lines, you got to go outside, turn around 3 times, and da 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 da. Do acknowledge it, because it's weird things have happened. But I've been very lucky, Nicholas, to have performed in over 23 of his plays, directed about 8 or 9 of them. Um, there's something about his work that I find uh, entrancing, um, or, uh, lyrical, muscular. I understand Shakespeare. I understand the characters. I understand the language for the most part. I love talking about it. I love coaching it. I love that excitement when a young actor understands something about Shakespeare, a speech that he or she is doing, and that light bulb goes off, and oh my God, that's what it means. Oh, I love that. Can I try it again? Can I try it again? That's what I live for. Um, Nowadays, of course, there are certain Shakespeare plays that you say, oh, okay, I don't think we should do Taming of the Shrew right now. It's just a little bit the treatment of Kate by Petruchio. We don't want to do it right now. But I'm a big, huge fan of Shakespeare, and I've adapted a couple of his plays on my own that I've directed with my theater company. And we try, and right about now, Shakespeare it's time for Shakespeare to be adapted.
Mm.
It's time for Shakespeare it's time for us to now say, okay, let's take it apart a little bit more and make it more contemporary. Yes, we can still do Jacobean costumes, but let's find a way to have more than 1 in 10 or 1 in 7 truly understand what is being said. Let's get 4 out of 7. Let's take 25% of his language now and not fix it, but massage it a little bit
Mm,
so that most people in the audience will understand it. And I'm all for that. I'm all for that. Yeah.
yeah.
I'm not sure if I answered your question, but
No, and more so. So thank you.
yeah.
Yeah, so that's so one of my questions was about putting a potential moratorium on some of the plays, as you mentioned, Shrew, but also in our class we've read like Othello and The Tempest, and similar conversations have been had, like maybe these plays need to be put away for a while, unless they are being adapted in fresh ways that allow that either make them more accessible or teach us something new about them.
Right.
And I'm curious, like, what is your opinion on that idea?
Oh, yes, 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 and yes. Absolutely. Absolutely. Look, and 10 years ago, if this interview would have happened 10 years ago, I would be like, no, of course not. What are you talking about? Ugh, click, I'm going away. Not that I wouldn't have done that, but no, I would have said, no, my God, it's Shakespeare. Let's figure it out. Let's say it all. I was in a production of Antony and Cleopatra 100 years ago, directed by Estelle Parsons for New York Shakespeare Festival. And we rehearsed 3.5, almost 4 months with that production. Every word, nothing, not one word was cut. Not one word. We did it in Spanish and English. It took forever to produce it and get it up. But not one word was, and I was so proud to be in a company of actors directed by a wonderful actress, director, teacher, mother, writer, Estelle Parsons, to do that. And I was thrilled. Nowadays, 4 hours of Antony and Cleopatra? No, 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 no. It won't happen, right? We have to find a way, as a producer, certainly. I won't speak as an audience member or as even as a director, but as a producer, I want to look out and see different ages, different uh, demographics sitting in my audience, anticipating a Shakespeare piece that I want them to understand. I want them to say, I've never understand Othello as I do now.
Mm,
Why is it didn't even sound like Shakespeare? Now, of course, that has to do with the director, that has to do with the actors, the conceptualization of it, the ease by which the actors speak, right? Audiences need that nowadays. There's too much. There's 24 hours television. There's 150 channels, right? You can get Hulu and Disney and Day on your cell phone. You can get all this stuff. You can books on tape. You can get Audible. There's so many ways now that people can be entertained almost for free,
mm,
right? Almost all these channels, right? I'm in a hotel room now. I can lay in that sofa right there and click, click, click for 15 minutes and not see something twice, right? So there's so much to entertain us now. So when we say I'm gonna do Othello at my theater company, why would you, Nicholas, want to come see my production of Othello when you could go to any machinery you have right now and find something on YouTube? You can find a production of Othello on YouTube right now. What's going to make you pay $30 to come sit in my theater to watch Othello? Maybe because a certain actor is in it. That's great, right? But I want the audiences to come and sit and watch Othello and realize, oh my gosh, I get it. I understand it. I I love this. What made me love it so much? Well, because the artistic director, Peter Callender, or Migdalia Cruz, or my gosh, um, a number of other writers. I'm blanking on people's names right now because have taken some time to look at that text and say, how can I change this language here, this line, this passage to a more contemporary language so that it could be absorbed by audience members? And I think that's the direction every theater company is going in right now. You've heard of the Play On initiative at Ashland, the
I don't.
Oregon. Yeah,
Okay.
look it up. The
Okay.
Oregon Shakespeare Festival, right? It's the Play On initiative. It's funded by the Hits Foundation, HITZ, I believe it is. But that's where this whole rumbling of not fixing Shakespeare, but adapting Shakespeare started. Um, One of the places, I shouldn't say started because I'm not sure what other uh, organizations, but this foundation put down some money to get all these amazing actors, writers, Amy Freed, um, a number of other directors and writers to adapt Shakespeare. And it's working. It's beautiful. And it's happening all over the country right now. So Shakespeare should indeed be adapted. Like, you can pick up, um, you can have 8, 9 interpretations of the Bible, right? This
Mm.
version, that version, this version, that version. You can pick up the Bible, you can go online right now and type a biblical phrase, and there are 7, 8, or 9 different editions of the Bible that has that same phrase. Why not in Shakespeare? And this is what we need going into the future, that producers, directors need to be more creative, absolutely more creative, to keep people coming to see Shakespeare, or else they'll stop. If you don't understand someone's language, if you have a professor in school that you don't know what he or she is saying at any given time, why would you come back to that course? You wouldn't. You wouldn't. So you need to see yourself. You need to see yourself on stage when you see Shakespeare, and you need to understand it, and you need to see your neighbor, you need to see a family member, you need to see all those. I mean, in any theatrical piece, of course, but especially with Shakespeare. And I think that's the direction that theater producers, Shakespeare companies should go, or else Shakespeare would become this impossible language, impossible plays to watch anymore. There's too much out there to keep us busy.
Mm-hmm. Mm. Yeah. What you just said, like my class spoke last week with director Kim Wield, um, who phenomenal. But someone asked, like, what do you think differentiates the experience between like going to the theater and like watching a movie with friends, or like going to the movie theater? And she brought up this like sort of studied phenomenon, which is that like audience members' heartbeats like sync up.
Yeah, I read
And
that article. Yeah,
you're right. And she was like, I don't think that happens at a movie theater.
it doesn't.
Um, which I thought was just so like such a clear answer to the question.
It is a brilliant answer, and that's something that I've read about years ago, and it's becoming more and more of the answer, of why we need to get back in the theater. Because after, when the lights go down and there's that silence, and right before the lights come back up again on stage, something happens with the people sitting next to you, behind you, in front of you, above you. That anticipation, and we all feel it in the theater the same, without even knowing it. And as the lights come up and the first lines of whatever play, two households, both alike in dignity, in fair Verona, where we lay our scene. And as that prologue begins, we all start feeling the same thing, the fights start with Samson and Gregory, and then we see Romeo for the first time. And by the time maybe Benvolio and Tybalt fight, all our audiences, all the entire uh, um, uh, crowd, we're all together, and that's what I miss most about it. And that is absolutely true. It's a study, yes, and it's scientifically proven, yes. But as an actor, someone that's been doing this all my life, I know it for a fact. I feel it. I feel it as a director when I'm sitting in the audience, having directed something, and I'm watching a first preview or a final designer or a final run, a final dress rehearsal with an invited audience, or even opening night. I feel it within the audience. And
Mm,
when I talk to my actors about it, there's nothing like that feeling. It's
mm,
absolutely true.
yeah.